Yes, Matt.
Um, who is the greatest American flash painter in history?
Ooh. It depends what your style is. I would say, in terms of breadth, I would say to me, Sailor Jerry. But the subject of our conversation today is definitely up there, if not the top of a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is my smooth segue into the cold open. It was spoiled because the answer, I think, is this guy we're talking about today is one of the categories. So welcome to Beneath the Skin, the show about the history of everything, told you the history of tattooing. I am Dr. Matt Lodder, and I'm here with esteemed producer Thomas Omani.
Honorary doctorate, Dr. Tom.
And should be doctor, hopefully will be doctor at some point in the future, guest, returning guest to the show, as I have to pronounce his name, Terry Manton. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me back on.
How you doing?
Doing great, yeah.
You're looking well, you're looking young, you're looking healthy.
It's the life up in Scotland, the fresh air and the open spaces.
The lovely tap water.
The lovely
yeah.
tap. Is it finally finishing the project? Because we're here today, listeners, to talk about Terry's new book, Hidden Legacy, The Life and Art of Alexander Colville Gordon, a project that's been in the works for a while, that is just phenomenal, and we're going to talk all about the book. But yeah, is your good mood and your fresh countenance a product of actually having finished this project that's been going on for a long time?
Yeah, I'm having a wee break from tattoo history just now. I'm going to have a month off. I've been at the Alec Gordon book solid for 6 months.
Yeah.
So, but it was very enjoyable. It's not a task. It's never a task.
Yeah, it's been a joy, and I know. 6 months writing it at least, but the research that's been going on for a long time. So, I guess maybe before we get into Alec's story, maybe let's talk about how the project came about for you. What got you interested in Alexander Colville Gordon?
The first obvious thing for me is his Scottish name.
Yeah.
Years ago when I seen his name at first, Alexander Gordon, that just shouts out Scotland. And I always made a note to go back to him at some point. When my research normally focuses on people from the Victorian period, that kind of time. And I was working my way through these people, and I always made a note to look at Alexander Gordon. And I eventually got round to it and stumbled on, a treasure chest of stuff and connections and stuff like that. So that was the first time that I came across his name. But maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, I started to look into his life and start to map it out and to see where he fell into the timeline.
And what did we know about him before you started doing the deep dive? So what did sort of everybody know about this name before you started kind of working through the mystery and the puzzles that we're going to get into?
So his name had popped up a few times on different adverts, old newspaper articles. He had popped up in the census as a tattooist. He popped up a few times in different places. But there's very, very little known about Alexander Gordon. He kept himself extremely private, as we'll go on to discover.
Because this is, you talk about kind of, you have these lists and finding, and we all, those of us that do this, we all have these kind of names. And for me, before your amazing work on this, Alec Gordon was just another one of those names where, he'd crop up occasionally, but you wouldn't be able to, there was no substance as far as we could tell. There was no kind of art that was belonging to this guy. He was just another name in what is, quite a kind of patchy history, a name that would come up in a census, in a street directory, in an advert, maybe sometimes mentioned in passing, but there's lots of these names, right? So what was it that made Gordon the kind of the real thread to keep pulling on for you?
Well, as I say, I always had him down as somebody that I would look into further. But the problem with this, as you know, is somebody with a very common name like Alexander
Yeah,
Gordon is
absolute
very
nightmare.
difficult to look into. Very difficult to research because there's thousands of Alexander Gordons in Scotland and in England and in Ireland,
And
in
And in
America.
America, yeah. I
Yep.
was doing some research years ago, trying to find a very early tattooed criminal, and when you find out that his name's William Davis, you're like, no, that's it.
Yeah.
I got literally nothing.
Yeah. That's,
Alexander Gordon's a little bit better than that, but not much. But the Colville maybe helps a bit. But yeah, so he was someone who, as you said, you have these kind of names and you go and check, and nothing was coming up, right?
So what happened was I was researching Harry Battle down in Portsmouth, Harry and his wife Lucy.
Yeah.
And this was at the turn of the century, and they were professional tattoo artists. And I was working my way through their lives.
And they were fairly prominent. I mean, Harry especially was a name that people did know and sort of features in the sort of standard histories, at least, right?
So I was doing Harry and Lucy's timeline, and I was working my way through it. Then I realised that they had a son who was involved in tattooing in London, a guy called Harry Battle Jr. So I actually reached out to his family, and his son was still alive. He's still alive today, Richard Battle. And he had worked with his father as a tattoo artist. So Richard was a great source for this project because I could ask him any question and he could answer it. So he was fantastic. And he sent me quite a few newspaper clippings of his father's career in London. And lots of these clippings featured the man named Alexander Gordon. And I was quite confused because I'm thinking, this guy's dead. This guy died, 15 years before sort of Harry Battle was there. But Richard explained to me that his father had inherited all Alexander Gordon's designs and machines and had also adopted his name for his tattoo career. So Harry Battle worked in London under the name Alexander Gordon. So I realised there was somebody who had passed away previous whose name was Alexander Gordon. So I began to look for that gentleman. And he had passed away in 1950. And once I found his death certificate, I could then work my way back all the way through.
Because there was, I remember there was a BBC radio interview, which sadly the audio doesn't seem to have survived. I went looking for that, of Alec Gordon, president of the, one of the early British tattoo associations and stuff in like 1954 or 55 or something. And as you said, like that seems to be a bit confusing given that, as far as we know, this other Alec Gordon was supposed to be dead by then.
Well, the thing was, Richard helped me to separate that. So I knew that Richard's father was just using Alexander Gordon's name, his flash, that kind of stuff. He was trading on that at that time. But I wanted to find out who the real man Alexander Gordon was. So when I found his death certificate, I could see that his name was Alexander Colville Gordon, and that helped to identify him, that middle name. Colville is a very Scottish name as well. So he definitely had a Scottish background, this gentleman. So I thought if I can narrow it down by just searching for Alexander Gordon, I could find out lots more about this man. And of course, that helped because I found his marriage certificate. He got married in London in 1908 under the name Alexander Colville Gordon, and he put down his occupation as tattooist. So that was a good starting point.
100%. Yeah. It's so nice when you get those pieces of real, because sometimes they come through and the occupation will be, coachman or house painter or sometimes artist generically, it's this kind of genealogical research is so difficult, as you said, particularly when names are similar. And one of the things you're so good at, Terry, is really kind of ferreting out those details and really kind of, I remember as this was coming together, you'd sort of share things with me occasionally, and I'd sort of always be pushing you, saying, "Look, how can we be sure this is the same person? How can we check?" And every time you went away and did the work, and as I say, I wrote the forward for this book, which I'm very happy to have done because I was sort of skeptical at the beginning, I have to say, and as it all came together, and you really made a slam dunk perfect case. So, what do we now know about him? And maybe we'll talk about some of the other discoveries as we go through the story. But this is a guy who, as we're going to talk about, like I really think, and I say in my forward, and I've said before to you, I think he's the greatest splash painter in British history, perhaps even Western tattoo history per se. But he'd been completely forgotten, or perhaps that's not quite the right word. He taken steps, as you said, to kind of keep his reputation or keep his name secret. You suspect for tax purposes, probably.
Yeah,
I
think so.
I was listening, as an aside, I was listening to a comedy podcast. There was a comedian called Ian Cognito. Have you heard of him? Good. It's a great name. He was a stand-up comedian on the circuit, and he went by Ian Cognito. And someone was booking in something for him once and said, what's your real name, Ian, for the I mean, to pay you an invoice or something. What's your actual name? He said, who are you? The tax man. So who is this guy? What do we know about him?
So what I found out when I was looking for him was that in the census, the first census that he appears in, so he appears in the 1911 census.
Which is full of tattooists.
Full of tattoos. Lots of guys have now accepted this as a full-time occupation. Yeah. They're not frightened to say that. But Alec Gordon at that time was down in Chatham at that time. So in Chatham, tattooing at that time was Manly Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes, Bill Mansford, Jemmy Green, and a few other guys that were coming and going. Some of the kind of itinerant tattoos were passing through there.
And I guess if people are listening who don't know, Chatham is a big naval dockyard still to this day, was a big shipbuilding port as well, very important for the Royal Navy, has been since the Napoleonic era.
Yeah, so he was down there at that time. And in the census form, he writes on the census form that he is a visitor to this country from America. Yeah. That he's an American citizen and that he's a horse rancher. This is what he says, So you're thinking to yourself, that's not something that would be popular down in Chatham in the naval dock.
There's not a lot of ranching or even, I suspect, horses in Chatham. Exactly. Again, for people listening, it's a pretty kind of low rent naval dockyard town on the south coast of the UK. There's not a lot of ranching going on.
But that certainly caught my eye, and I put that in my notes. I thought, well, I must look at that again. I must try and find in America where this guy came from. Yeah. So what you would naturally do then is start to look at the American census for 1900 or 1890
and travel records, people leaving the US coming to the UK or via even somewhere like Singapore or Australia, so people going westwards. Yeah.
So you're looking for an Alexander Gordon, and of course he's leaning on the Scottish thing as well. The name Alexander Gordon rings Scottish, so you're thinking maybe this guy has lived in Scotland, has emigrated to America, and has came back to England. But I couldn't find anything positive to say that. So again, it's just notes. There's nothing to sort of put that, in concrete, set it in concrete. So at this moment in time, it's still open-ended. Then they released the 1921 census. Yeah. And in that one, he says...
You were there day one. I remember you messaged me the night before saying, tomorrow it's coming up. That's Christmas right. For genealogists, yeah.
So I found him in that again, but this time he has abandoned the thought that he's American, and he says that he was born in Glasgow. And again, I went to the Scottish records and I could not find this man in Glasgow anywhere. And I tried all the usual tricks. I tried years round about it. I looked for his father, his mother, and
you try spelling, you try alternate spellings, don't you? And
yes,
typos and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you do all the tricks that you normally would do, but nothing came up that would match the profile. So again, you're waiting on something coming through that can tie this together.
Yeah.
And when you had sent me, around about 2020, I think it was, you had sent me an interview from the John Bull magazine from 1948.
Yeah.
And I read that interview, and it was, it was done by a guy called Herbert Cole, and he had been interviewing a tattooist in Chatham.
Yeah.
And this guy said that his name was Charlie Bell, which is a very well-known name in tattooing. But in the article, the way that this Herbert Cole described this man, first thing I knew was this is not Charlie Bell.
Yeah.
because the photograph of this man showed a different man than Charlie Bell.
Yeah.
I actually had a photograph of Charlie,
Yeah.
so I knew it wasn't him. But in the interview, the tattoo artist says that he first seen tattooing in Arizona, then came to New York, where he was heavily tattooed by Charlie Wagner. He had bought a few machines from Wagner. So I thought to myself, this must be the guy.
Yeah.
This has to be the same guy that was down in Chatham who said he was a horse rancher.
I think it might have been 2019, because I think it's when we were planning the exhibition tour, and it was going to Chatham, and we were trying to add more about Charlie Bell, and because we wanted to put specific Chatham stories in that exhibition. And you were helping me out because you'd been in touch with Charlie Bell's family, and we were trying to make sense of this. And again, I think I sent to you because I said, this seems to make no sense to me. Like, what is going on here? So yeah, again, how these things converge. So you were like, this isn't Charlie Bell. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I was 100% positive this is not Charlie Bell, and this is leaning more towards the guy that we had found in the 1911 census, who said he was American, who said he was a horse rancher.
Right. Yeah.
Because in this interview in the John Bull magazine, the guy says that he was a saddle bum in Arizona, which is a rancher, So I'm thinking this has got to be Alexander Gordon. This has to be the same guy. We're now starting to piece things together. This guy must have started his career in the USA.
And also, I love that either the horse ranching bit of the story, which again we don't know, I guess, really, but the horse ranching part was either definitely true or it was a long-standing tale that he was telling. Which is nice, because otherwise that horse ranching detail, I think, is, as you said, the piece that really joins it together. Because otherwise, it would have been very difficult to make that connection. Yeah.
I mean, some of the things that he said were certainly lining up, by saying that he saw tattooing in Arizona, first of all.
And the photos, the photo's mad, isn't it? Because he's got a big hat on and you can't really see his face. And yeah.
I mean, he was doing that for a reason. He was trying to hide his identity. Even in the newspaper article, he was very clipped in his answers. He wasn't really going to elaborate too much on who he was or where he came from. He only gave the very basics, but it was enough to put him in the frame and think this could be the same guy. We can't say at this point this is the same guy, but let's put everything together and see where we end up.
And is it at this point that we start to think that he's connected to the images? Because you've been talking about his story and his sort of his paper records, but the other really important part of this is joining up the incredible images which you produce as a catalogue in this book of his incredible art, which prior to your work people suspected were by other people, and we'll talk about that. But do you think it was it at that point, that John Bull photograph and others, where you started to kind of try and connect him to his artwork as well?
Yeah, because what happens is if you look at that photograph of Alec Gordon in that article, you can see some of the designs in the background. And this is what we do when we're looking at these things. We're looking for clues everywhere. We're looking in the background.
Zooming in on the backgrounds all the time.
Yeah. And there in the background was these very distinctive designs. And you're thinking, okay, that's another tick in the box. And then when I got other photographs of this same gentleman, the photographs, the designs in the background were more prominent. And you're thinking, well, this is now leaning towards, this is the guy who drew these very distinctive designs. And they had appeared in other places as well.
For me, this was when we were putting together, so for listeners that don't know, I did an exhibition called British Tattoo Art Revealed in 2017. And a big part of the material that was on display that we borrowed was from the collection of Neil Hopkins Thomas, who we've talked about on the show before, who was the great nephew of Jessie Knight. Now, I wanted to include Jessie's story in the exhibition because obviously she's a really important female figure. And, I'd heard sort of on the grapevine that this guy had a few bits and pieces that belonged to Jessie. And so I contacted him to ask if he would be happy to lend them to the exhibition. And I tell this story in the intro to Terry's book, but it was kind of amazing because I literally was, I tell this story a lot when I'm talking to people because for a historian, it's so great. It's like, oh yeah, I've got a few things in the loft is the phrase. And there's a few more things in the loft coming up later in the story too. But Neil started sending me pictures of the few things he had in the loft, and it turned out to be over 1,000 individual objects, including hand-painted flash sheets and this incredible banner, which became really the hero object of this show. It was so funny in hindsight. The photo I have of it is like Facebook, low resolution, phone cam, 2017. Neil's got his sandals on. It's on the carpet. It's been taken out of a plastic bag that it's been in the loft. And I was just like agog, like my jaw was slack, right? And Neil said, "Oh yeah, this was painted by my great grandfather, great grandfather Charlie Knight." I said, "Okay, great." So we put them on display in the exhibition, and I think very quickly I realised it couldn't have been, partly because I recognised the designs. We'll talk about this in a second. I'd seen this artist's hand before in odd sheets that had been published. But so I tried to kind of ask people who did it, and some people were a bit coy, and some people said they didn't know, they thought it was by a couple of names who we'll get into. But it got to the point where I didn't need to, and I didn't have time to figure out, and I couldn't at the time figure out who it was by. But we put them up, and everyone was blown away. And you say in the book, you saw those on display, didn't you, when the show came up to Scotland, Terry?
Yeah.
And again, you had probably the same visual memory of me of these designs, but also at that time didn't know 100% who they were by. So do you want to tell that part of the story?
Well, I had went to see the exhibition when it came to air, and I went round twice, and I must admit I did study the banner. It's about 10 feet long.
We all did.
High.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, that's obviously the work of the same guy, Alexander Gordon.
Yeah.
But there was never any name attached to the banner. It just said that it had once been owned by Jesse's father.
Yeah.
So at that point, again, I was just adding that to my notes, saying this is a possibility that this could be painted by Alec Gordon.
And we'd seen, these designs, we'd seen them. They've been published in books for a long time because sheets by clearly the same artist were in the collection of Henk Schiffmacher, attributed to people like Cecil Rhodes and Manley Rhodes, who you've mentioned. What other names came up? Sailor Moscow, various other people who sort of claim that this was the artist, but I think Lionel Titchener had some by this artist. They'd come up fairly frequently, but there was no set attribution, as you said earlier on. No one had really heard of this guy Alec Gordon, and certainly no one in print had made that connection. So for me, as I said, for me, the name Alec Gordon was just a name in a list, of lots of fairly kind of, as far as I understood, not very prominent tattooers. They registered, they were around, their names were kind of floating around, but didn't have a huge impact on things. And these images, however, were an amazing, beautiful, complicated story. And as you said, like when we started looking at that John Ball photograph and even photographs of Harry Battle's shop, actually, you see these same designs in the background, and then again, then you started putting the story together even more.
Yeah, so the sort of telling thing was Richard Battle had sent me a photograph of his father in his shop, surrounded by these beautiful designs and banners in the background. So I asked Richard, where did these come from? And he said, my father inherited them from Alexander Gordon. So that was the most telling sort of, we could then move forward and say, well, that is who owned them last. We can safely assume that Alexander Gordon painted these himself. And they matched the banner, and they matched lots of sheets that came up that have been found in the Manley Rhodes collection, in the Cecil Rhodes collection, and in various other collections, Joe Hartley, Les Scouse. So we could now say that this was the man that painted all of these designs, even though they were in other people's collections. Alec Gordon was the original painter of them designs.
Yeah, It's amazing because I think for years, because they're all hand painted. I mean, the designs repeat a little bit sometimes between sheets, but because they're all hand painted, they weren't production sheets in the same way that we understand now. They were always associated. I remember again seeing them, attributed to the Rhodes brothers in particular, whose work had been published a few times in I think Chris Wroblewski's book had a couple of them in. But yeah, but he wasn't signing any of these sheets. He wasn't taking credit for them even, really, as far as we can tell. That they just kind of existed, scattered between his collections, and it was really this moment, I suppose, in the late 2010s, as the internet, people started looking for things on the internet, and as you said, like things started coming together, that we started to understand that this was a body of work by someone who's really special. So I guess that leads the question to so when did he come to England? How did he start? What do we know about him now? And as a sort of follow on from that, why do you think he sort of hid his light under a bushel a little bit?
Well, I think what happens is he comes to England. We know he's here in 1908. So there's a whole pile of tattooists in London at that time. There's at least 30 tattooists making a living at tattooing in London. Lots of these guys didn't have a shop. These guys would be working in amusement arcades and, in fairs and stuff like that. They would be itinerant, moving around, going where the work was.
I mean, even the idea of a banner suggests some kind of travelling tattoo, or either a fairground or probably, for my money, more likely, rolling up on port when the ships came in. You could set up in a little booth on the dockside and get your clients that way.
Yeah. So you can see that he starts in London and then he migrates down to Chatham. He's there for a couple of years in Chatham. And this is where he forges his friendship with Manly Rhodes and Cecil Rhodes. Now, I personally believe that they three men worked together in Chatham.
Yeah.
But I have nothing to say that concrete, but they were friends for the rest of their life up until their death.
And given that so much of what we knew about this artist, before you put the name to him, was through the Rhodes brothers collections, that would seem a pretty reasonable suggestion to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they had a lot of his stuff in the collection. So I think Alec Gordon was quite a prolific painter. He was confident in his work. He could draw most tattoo designs, lots of American iconography, lots of Scottish iconography as well in it, that turned up. So you can see where he's coming from. He's brought a lot of American designs and ideas to this country at that time, stuff that he's seen in Charlie Wagner's while he's being tattooed.
So do you think he was born in America? Is that your best theory now?
I honestly can't say, Matt.
We don't know for sure.
To say it will come eventually.
Yeah.
We will find something to place him there. My gut feeling is that he was probably born in Scotland, and they probably emigrated to America at that time. And he's come back this way when he's 20 years old. Back to the old country.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned Charlie Wagner there. There is some sense now in the stories that he's told that he worked or at least was tattooed in New York.
Yeah, so what Alec Gordon says, he says that he purchased 2 machines from Wagner and he got pretty heavily tattooed by him. So that says that he spent a bit of time in New York, if he got tattooed. So you're thinking to yourself that round about 1908, he has came to England. And as far as I can see, he has lived in England for the rest of his days for the next, 42 years.
Yeah. And worked and tattooed where?
Well, what happens is he comes back from Chatham around about 1913 and he starts to work in Showland at that time. So he is moving around the country working for showmen. Showmen are actually placing adverts looking for him, requesting him to come and work. So he's obviously talented. He's got a good reputation. At one point, 1915, up in Ripon, up in Yorkshire, he is employed by a showman called J.R. Wallace. And Wallace has already secured the employment of Joseph Hartley, and he's looking for a second tattooist to come and help Hartley out because Hartley is inundated with work.
Yeah.
and Alec Gordon answers the call. So again, this is where Alec Gordon and Joseph Hartley become friends. And again, they have a lifetime friendship. And this is why lots of Alec Gordon's work would be found in Joe Hartley's collection, which would then be passed on to Les Scouse, which was then sold on to Henk. So that's the connection.
And I mean, why then the given that his art is so incredible, and I want to get into some of the details of that in a second, but given that his art is so amazing, why do you think his name did, if not exactly disappear, kind of was disconnected from his painting and was, he until your work, Terry, as I said, was just another name, and he didn't, he didn't have the kind of reputation that Hartley did, or someone, some of the guys from the earlier generations did, or even the next generation. Why did his, given how good he is, why did his fame not kind of endure, do you think?
Well, you know yourself that some tattoo artists set out to be famous.
Yeah.
There was some who courted publicity, and I often think about George Burchett. Burchett was in a great position. He was in, Waterloo. He's not far from Fleet Street. If Fleet Street wanted a story, they would, trot some reporter down to George Burchett. He's got a room full of stories. He's ready to go. Burchett loved talking to the press, and he utilised it. But other guys never got the recognition and didn't want it either. And Alec Gordon, I have never seen a business card for Alec Gordon. I've never seen a leaflet for Alec Gordon. I've only seen one or two adverts for Alec Gordon. So he seems to want to keep a low profile. He doesn't want to be out there. The other thing about it was, after the First World War, when tattooing fell away at that point, lots of tattooers were forced to go back and take a job. They became sign writers, as Leo Heath did. They went into other jobs out with tattooing. Alec Gordon became a lorry driver, and was a lorry driver up until he retired around about 1947. So he would work as a lorry driver during the week and would only tattoo part-time. And I strongly believe that he was just trying to hide his identity from the taxman.
Yeah. That I think is probably, I mean, because you some of this discussion about where he was born and changing his immigration status, to modern ears might sound like he's trying to avoid some kind of immigration charge. The immigration system didn't really work like that at the time. The only other thing that I might have thought, but there's no evidence for this, is that, like Burchett, he changed his name to try and get out of some kind of military draft or military expectation placed upon him. But again, that doesn't seem to be the case. We don't seem to have any even mention that he was a sailor who had deserted, or someone who was trying to avoid a draft or any kind of military commitments, which is another reason that sometimes that people would change their names. I think you're right, Terry. The taxman
He's a man after my own
seems
heart.
to be the right one.
Me and Alex Gordon both wanted by HMRC.
So let's talk about his painting, Terry, because like I said, when I saw that banner for the first time in person, it just kind of floored me. I'm really convinced, actually, that banner is, one of the greatest pieces of Flash ever painted in Britain. And I mean, do you want to describe his painting style for people that haven't seen it? I mean, I really encourage people to get this book because every page will blow you away. And I've spent, the past 10 years of my life showing people Alec Gordon's work. And there's sheets here that I've never seen before. How would you describe his painting style, Terry?
Well, painting with the brush, he puts a lot of work into Flash. He's blending tints at that time, what other people would just be doing a very basic drawing, of a rose. They wouldn't be blending all the different colours and the leaves and the petals and all that kind of stuff. When Alec Gordon is painting something, he seemed to put a lot of work in it when he was painting with oil or watercolour. But in the later years, as colour became hard to come by, I've actually seen drawings that he's done that are very basic, and very basically coloured. There's no yellow in some of them sometimes, or there's no blue sometimes. I suppose depending on the current supply chain, So there is sheets out there that he has done quickly that would suit a tattoo shop more. When I was tattooing, you wanted to have the customer come in as quick as possible and get them back out as quick as possible, because it was like a barber shop back then. And Alec Gordon would work under the same circumstances. But I've saw flash that he's painted that is almost like, art quality. It's almost overpainted. And especially the travel books that he did that ended up in Joe Hartley's collection, that stuff seemed to be overpainted, for tattooing. It was maybe more to showcase his skill as an artist, because it certainly didn't lean towards tattooing in a commercial environment where you had 2 or 3 colours,
No, and some of the sheets don't even have any lines, right?
Exactly.
No outlines. It's a really interesting moment, again, in the emergent styles in tattooing, because a lot of the designs and the scale of them and the size of them are very American, as you said. There's a lot of kind of small American style designs, flags and hearts and stuff. But the way they're painted is very illustrative. It's very delicate. I mean, his color use, as you mentioned, Terry, is astonishing, and particularly he's using skin tones. So he's using pinks and peaches on paper and linen, where another tattooist who was just working for commercial reasons would just leave blank paper. Right? These are real paintings in a really specific sense. But he has a real as you said, kind of raw talent. I guess we don't have any evidence or knowledge if he ever had any formal art training. It's always seemed to me like he might well have done, particularly the way he paints women seems to be the product of someone who's done a lot of life drawing study. He'll do things like paint women from behind with the cracks in their back, and lots of kind of interesting poses of the kind that you would get if you studied at art schools and had models posing in front of you. But we don't have any mention that he ever went to art school, right, or any artistic training. He just seems to have this real raw talent is probably the wrong word, but it's something. As I say in the intro to the book, you can tell his work when you see it. It's such a distinctive style.
Yeah, it's very iconic. Once you start noticing it, you can't unsee it anywhere you look. And I have been lucky to see the collections of Hank Schiffmacher and Danielle and stuff like that, and you find this stuff in there.
Yeah.
And the minute you see it, it jumps out at you. You could be looking at a whole pile of other stuff, but the minute you see Alec Gordon's, you can tell by the sword handles, by the scrolls, by the ladies' faces, the flowers.
The eye sockets in the skulls.
Everything, yes.
Which I think I sent you that. I think the eye sockets from the skulls are referenced from particular photos of discovery of prehistoric skulls from a pre-Homo sapiens species around this time, because they have these really interesting eye socket ridges. I think it's the Neanderthal skulls. They have particular kind of eye socket ridges that Homo sapiens skulls don't have, and they were discovered and being kind of documented around this time. But when you see the way he draws skulls, they always have these pentagonal eye sockets. They're never just circles.
Yeah.
The other thing that really struck me, and this is something that I think has come out for me going through the sheets in your book that I haven't seen before, or even seen the ones I have seen before in a new light. A lot of it's quite sexy.
Yeah.
There's a real kind of, Edwardian 1920s style sexuality to these that's actually also not that common in mainstream production sheets. Maybe because they are not production, they're not subject to the same kind of potential censorship or issues that other tattooers may have made. But I was really struck looking at these sheets in detail in your book, all in one place, how spicy some of them are, how some of the poses of the women he's put in. It's pretty sexy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's quite something that's quite graphic, actually. He's
Yeah.
he's not left any details out.
Yeah, you've got women showing their bums. You've got very kind of provocative snakes placed in some of these. Um, the other thing that people will, I think, notice, and again, another defining feature for me of his work is how the men that he paints always look very effeminate to me.
Yeah,
Um, do we know anything about his sexuality? I guess, was he married?
he was married. Yes, he was
Yeah.
married for 40 odd years, and he had a stepdaughter. So I mean, I don't think he was.
No, I
I
don't
don't
think
think
he
he was.
was. Don't think he was gay. But there's something that people often see when they see his portraits, or paintings of military figures. The men look very girlish, and again, I wonder if that again may be a product of some kind of art school training. If he's learned how to draw by looking at women,
Yeah,
maybe it's inevitable that he's going to paint men too. Um, yeah, we don't have any photographs, do we, of his actual tattoos? I mean, we have a couple of photos of him tattooing, but we don't have really much evidence of what these designs in his hand, at least, looked like when they were transferred to skin, or how good he was as a tattooer. Is there any discussion of that in any sources that you found?
well, the only picture we have, there was a picture in, I think it was the Daily Mirror, where he had tattooed a guy who had been married,
Yeah, which is a
bigamously.
good story. Do you want to tell that story? It's a good story.
Well, what happened was there was a guy called Cecil Lamont, and he was a soldier. He was out in Burma, and he got married to another soldier out there, another girl out there. But he forgot to tell her that he was married back home with 5 kids.
Don't
Back in Dorset.
slip
So
my
he got a
mind.
tattoo in his arm of this new wife, with her name underneath it and all that. But when he went back home to his original wife, she was not happy. And they had a few fights and stuff like that. He assaulted her, she assaulted him, and they ended up in front of the magistrate. So the magistrate said to him, I'm going to give you a month to sort this out. You might want to think about getting that tattoo removed. Now, as you know, the simpler sort of solution to that is to have it covered up. So Cecil Lamont decides to inquire around to see if there's any tattooists. He's down in Dorset. There's no tattooist there at the time. He's told there could be one in Southampton, which there's not. This was 1947. And somebody tells him there's a tattooist in London and Paddington. So him and his wife make the 130-mile journey up to Paddington, and Alec Gordon tattoos over the offending tattoo one of his trademark snakes.
Yeah.
So it's quite a big thing on his arm. It costs the guy £2, which is like 2 weeks' wages.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, isn't it?
It's a lot of money. But the wife pays for it. She actually pays to have it covered up. So they invited along the newspapers, and the newspapers were there. They recorded the story.
Yeah.
Again, Alec Gordon used the name Charlie Bell. He did not use his own name. He said his name is Charlie Bell. And the photograph is taken. And if anyone, gets the chance to see the photograph, again, like Matt said earlier on, you will see that he has got his head down. His face is obscured by a big Homburg hat. And you can see the tattoo on his arm. And that is the only sort of clear picture of any tattoo I have ever seen by Alec Gordon.
Yeah, I sort of wonder, and this again may be an explanation or a hint of why the paintings were not particularly, unlike, say, Hartley's work, not particularly designed to be tattoos. He seems to be a painter first and a tattooer second, if that's the right word. Like, perhaps he's a better painter than he is a tattoo artist. And I don't know, but that would also probably be my instinct. I don't know what you think about that. I think he's probably. I mean, if he's as good a tattooer as he is a painter, I think we would have heard more about him, actually, because like the painting is so good. I really doubt a lot of it. I'm sure in the hands of most tattooers in that period wouldn't have actually ended up looking certainly not as good as they do on paper. But yeah.
Well, that's what I think. I think some of the early designs were overpainted.
Yeah.
To be used in a commercial tattoo shop.
Yeah. In the windows and on display.
Yeah, but for actual practical work, when I was tattooing, you drew your design quite simple. And if it was quiet in the shop, you added 2 or 3 more colours and, you did some fancy stuff. But you wouldn't want to be doing that on a Saturday afternoon
Nah.
when there's 15 guys waiting. So, what I think is, yes, he was a skilled painter, but I think through time he understood that he has to keep it basic. So you'll see some of his sheets in there are quite basic, 3, 4 colour. He's came away from that using his full skill as a painter, and he's become more of a kind of, it's almost an illustration simplified.
Yeah, it's really difficult. Again, we were talking about this with the exhibition. I've talked to you about this before. It's really difficult actually to date the sheets, isn't it? But I think you do a good a job of sort of arguing for some kind of timeline on them on that basis. Also on the basis of the handwriting, which doesn't change, but it might be a bit shakier slightly in some of the ones that you date a bit later on. But it's very difficult to place where these are. I mean, my guess on the banner and the sheets in the night collection was always around late World War One, mid 1920s, but you've made a good case that they could be much later than that. It's very difficult to tell exactly when each individual one of these sheets was painted. Yeah, Darian Bray's the guy that bought and then sold on the banner, so he's probably looked at it closer than anyone other than me in recent years.
Well, I've spoke to Darren about it. I've spoke to Jim Sills. We've had a good look at the banner and tried to date it. But Darren puts forward a good case. There is a design on the Charlie Knight banner that was on a magazine cover in 1935, 1936. So Darren, Mav Mess out in Portland in Oregon, Mav had seen that design and had said to Darren, this design appeared on a magazine cover 1935. So that would be the kind of period. So at that time, Charlie Knight was, still tattooing, still working away. I think that Charlie Knight commissioned that banner because Charlie Knight had been moving around the country, working with the fairs, that kind of thing. So I think Knight had it. And when Charlie Knight retired around about 1947, around about that time, I think Jessie inherited that banner.
Yeah.
And that is the lineage of that banner. I think that's why she had it.
Yeah, and we know from that Ron Acker's book that that was her prized possession, and we can see why. So let's talk about as we're coming up to kind of the 50-minute mark. Let's talk about some of the final 2 bits of painting I wanted to talk about, which were bits of the evidence and real great finds. So the first is this incredible image that you include on the cover of the book. This reclining lady, signed by a diamond artist. Tell us about that again. That amazing painting, that reclining woman that you include on the cover.
So that painting was painted by Alec Gordon in 1922, and at the very bottom of the painting, in the centre of it, he signs it. It's the only piece of art that I have ever seen signed, and it says A. Gordon, 1922. If you look at that painting, you will see the very distinctive style of designs painted on the tattooed lady's arms, her legs. That is the hand of Alec Gordon. That's the same designs that are on Charlie Knight's banner. It's the same designs that we found in all the different sheets. So what happened with that painting was done by Alec Gordon, and it ended up in the ownership of a gentleman down in Aldershot. We don't know who that was, but Jeff Jaguar, who's just passed away recently, Jeff had a tattoo shop in Aldershot, and this elderly gentleman came into the shop and sold him a few photographs of tattooed people. And a few weeks later, he brought in a painting as well that he had, and this was the painting that had been painted by Alexander Gordon. And Jeff bought that painting around about the 80s, and he kept it in his possession for many years, and he eventually sold that painting to Rambo. So in 2019, Rambo said to me that he had a painting in his possession. I had never seen it at that point, and he said it was painted by Alexander Gordon. So when I did see it, I recognise the designs on the skin, the arms. This is the same designs that we've seen everywhere else. But this has been signed by Alec Gordon, so we know that he painted it. So Rambo has that painting. And he also had another key piece of this puzzle. Rambo had bought stuff from a house clearance someplace outside Manchester. I think it was Altrincham or something like that. And in the house clearance was a tattoo machine by Alfred South and some designs painted by a tattoo artist called Professor Diamond. And it also had on the same sheet, it said, Professor Diamond, 11 Caledonian Road. That's in King's Cross. And it also had Alexander Gordon's home address on it. A. Gordon, 31 Shirland Road. So that ties it together. There was 3 designs painted on that. This is the key to the whole puzzle, Rambo's sheet. It's the only 2 signed artifacts that are known worldwide to have Alexander Gordon's name on them.
Yeah. And that, again, as you said, I think there was an amazing case before then, but as you said, this is the final piece of the puzzle. So Diamond was just another alias that he used, yeah?
So what he did was he used Diamond when he was working in Caledonian Road. So he worked in Caledonian Road in a pin table arcade. So pin tables were very popular at that time. And there was one in Caledonian Road called the Arcadia Pin Table Saloon. And Alec Gordon tattooed in there under the name Professor Diamond. That's the name that he used there. Again, hiding from the tax man.
It's a cool name. It's a good name.
Yeah, it's a great name.
If Tom dies before me, I'm going to take his name for my podcasting empire.
And if Matt dies before me, he's getting taxidermed and stuffed in the corner doing the Matt pose. Like you're in conversation, he's saying something revelatory. It's like leaning towards you. It's a very interactive hat rack I'm going to have.
That's going on my business card, Matt Lodder Interactive Hat Rack. I'll take it. Sorry, Terry, you were saying, so Professor Diamond is the name that he's using.
He uses that name, and some stuff has popped up, different things have popped up with that name on it as well. So we know that he used that name round about King's Cross at that time. The next place he turns up down in Aldershot when Jesse Knight is down there, and they have some kind of altercation down there.
Yeah, this made me laugh so much because I didn't know about this, and these letters that you again pried out of Rambo's collection into public view made me laugh so much when I read them. So yeah, do you want to tell that story? So we know that there was obviously some kind of at least business collection between Charlie Knight and Alec because of the collection. I didn't realize until I read this in your book that there was some kind of personal collection there. So yeah, what's that story?
So the story is that we know that Jesse was down in Aldershot, and part of the clue here is that Rambo had a letter in his collection from Jesse Knight to Les Scuss, and this is at 1947. So we know that Jesse's in Aldershot at this time, but Alec Gordon is also there. Now, the reason that Alec Gordon would be down there at that time is, it's pretty obvious that there's lots of soldiers there. There's still lots of movement after the Second World War. We've got national service. There's still plenty of soldiers kicking about. There are lots of tattoos down there. There's a guy called John Edward Brown. George Moss is down there. Albert Lloyd had been there. So there was lots of other tattoos there, not just Jesse and Alec Gordon. But what the letter shows, Jesse is writing to Les Scuss, and she is saying that she's now settled in Aldershot. She's got a flat there. She's got a shop there. She says she's not very happy. She says that in the letter, but she seems to be getting some kind of unwanted attention from Alec Gordon. He must have been threatening her or causing her some kind of problem.
The quote is hilarious, right? It says, "Re A. Gordon, I should give him a fine, wide berth. I'll come and see you one day when I can manage the time and tell you a funny story about him. He won't bother me any. He's had some ha-ha as regards working. Well, you might as well tell me William the Conqueror is coming."
Yeah, so you can see that she's obviously spoke to somebody who has went to speak to Alec Gordon and said, back off, leave her alone. So I think she feels now that he won't come and bother her. What we do know is that Alec Gordon left Aldershot quickly after that, because by the end of 1947, he was back in Paddington, tattooing in Parade Street.
Yeah.
So he was there a long time. He wasn't a long-term rival, but there was no love lost between them, it seems.
Yeah, interesting. Jessie, I imagine, was quite a hard woman to get on with if she fell out with you. It's just the vibe I get from. So finally, I just want to talk about Jim Sills and the incredible. And you mentioned Richard Battle at the beginning. That for me, and I fully, openly wept when I saw these in person. Jim Sills, who is a tattooist from London, basically allowed you to publish images of two more banners which have come to light. These incredible banners that he now owns. Do you want to tell that story? I mean, for me, as I said, the banner, the one that Darren Bray bought from Neil that was in my exhibition is, as I said, I think the greatest piece of British flash painting yet to come to light. But and we hadn't seen any more, but Jim came across, if that's the right word, two more of these banners, and you put them in the book, and they're astonishing things. So yeah, how does Jim and Jim Sills help you complete this story? Because it felt to me, again, just from talking to you as this story was coming together and then reading the book, that Jim really was like the cherry on the cherry on the cake, the icing on the cake of this whole thing.
Well, Jim had been introduced to me by Lal round about 2020. And we start phoning on a weekly basis and we're chatting away. And Jim's entry into tattooing in the 1970s, his first tattoo was by Harry Battle back then. So the first time walking into a tattoo parlour, he walks in to Harry's place and he's surrounded by Alexander Gordon's designs. And that sticks in his mind. He doesn't know who Alexander Gordon is. No
one knows who Alexander Gordon is. Even Alexander Gordon doesn't know who Alexander Gordon is half the time.
So he's totally enamoured by these designs. And throughout Jim's tattoo career, he's always interested in making that connection with Parade Street, finding out more stuff about Harry Battle. And he always promises himself that he will look into that at some point. And Lal tells him and Lal are good friends. Lal says, you need to speak to Terry Manton. He's been doing a lot of research on Harry Battle recently. So Jim reaches out to me. We become friends. We talk every week on the phone. And he asks me, he says, could you give me a contact for Richard Battle? He said, because Richard tattooed me, way back in the 70s. So I put the two guys in touch. It turns out they live a mile apart or a couple of miles apart. They've lived there all their lives, a few miles apart. They become great friends. They meet on a regular basis once a week. And Richard is not interested in tattoos in any manner, but Jim is always, drilling them and asking them questions on my behalf as well, talking to Richard. And I say, ask Richard this.
Jim is one of those, he's one of the kind of early tattoo nerds. He was one of the first British people to get tattooed by Ed Hardy. Like, he was a tattoo nerd before anyone was a tattoo nerd, Jim Sills was.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing as well, Jim is a collector and historian as well. Has collected lots of stuff and knows a lot about British tattooing. So he goes to Richard every week. They have tea, they have cake, they chat about different things out with tattooing. But one of the things that is always on the sort of horizon is Richard says to Jim, and he told me the same thing, he said, there is some stuff in the loft belonging to my father. And Jim never asked to see it. He never asks him. He never forces Richard. They forget all about it. 5 years later, Richard gets somebody to go into the loft and retrieve the stuff that's up there. And Jim goes round to see Richard and is totally blown away. There's machines there. There's transformers. There's lots of, sundries and stuff like that. But among it is a big sheet of Alec Gordon's designs, and also as well rolled up are two canvas banners. And they unroll them, and these are canvas banners that were painted by Alexander Gordon. So they're now in Jim's possession. Jim let me see them, and that was the catalyst for writing the book. I thought, well, Alexander Gordon's dead, 75 years this year. We've now discovered 2 new banners that we didn't think existed, and these banners can be seen in photographs of Alexander Gordon's shop in Praed Street. They're hanging in the window. So these are really an important part of British tattoo history. And there they've been in the loft for 50 years. And Jim gets them photographs, sends them to me. And I think, yeah, the time is right to write this book. This man's story has to be told.
So these 2 new banners, they're not as long as the Jesse Knight one. They're square. But what really blew me away when I saw them in person, rolled out on Jim's living room floor, was actually Alec has painted designs way, way bigger than on any other sheet that I've seen. There's a huge Battle Royale scene. There's a huge American eagle on one of them. There's a big Native American head. And just in general, some of the designs repeat from other things we've seen, but these, because I think, as you said, they were intended probably as much for display as they were for tattooing, the designs themselves are bigger. And so you really get to see his painting talent really like at its absolute pinnacle. To see him working at a bigger scale than you do in those flash sheets, you really, really get to see what an absolutely phenomenally talented illustrative artist he is. The way he uses color in particular. Again, not a lot of line work on these. They're painted in oil paint. He uses watercolor a lot on the most of the flash sheets. Some of them are in oil, but most of them are watercolor. These are oil on canvas, and the sophistication of the way he uses color in particular is just astonishing. And I don't know what you thought when you first saw these in person, Terry, but I was very familiar with Alec's work, with the I was by this point knew they were by Alec, but I'd never seen him working at this scale. And to see the way he's like shading skulls, the way he's doing, there's a beautiful like female face with a dagger through it and a snake. Just he's such an incredible draftsman and painter that. This for me was as I said, the kind of pinnacle of really going, yeah, this guy was good. Because when you painting small flash pieces is one thing, but painting graphically distinctive stuff at much bigger than it ever be tattooed, you really get a sense of what a good artist he is. I mean, you're a sign writer by training, right? So you have a better insight into this than I do as well. Like, does that make sense? I think seeing these at scale, seeing these bigger works, just really was. Just took him to another level for me.
Well, I think what these are, I think what the banners are, these are showpieces. These are, in the old showman's terminology, these are flash.
These are flash,
they're designed to hang up and bring people inside. And he had them in the window of the shop, and people standing outside would look at that and be blown away by it and drawn into the shop where he had, 1,700 other designs inside.
Yeah, absolutely mind-blowing. Do you think there's more out there? I mean, I guess there probably must be. We found 3 of these banners in 50 years. Do you reckon there's more out there to be found?
There is more stuff out there. We know there is more sheets out there belonging to Alec Gordon. We know that. When I was trying to identify the ones that existed, I narrowed it down to sort of 10 collectors. And the good thing was I knew 9 of them personally. So what I did was I emailed them all in one evening, and within 24 hours, they had all come back and agreed to give me their stuff to use in the book, to put the book together. If they hadn't have done that, I don't think I would have put the book together. But this all pushed towards writing the book. The Jim Sills discovery, and all the guys all over the world giving me the sort of flash designs to reproduce in the book. That's what made this happen.
Yeah, I really think as well, Terry, I talked about this before with Tom. I think books get published that then people, start using for reference, and it sort of brings our style into existence or into essential. I think this is going to be, I really hope it is going to be one of those books. I think already we've seen tattooers from the stuff that we put out for the Jesse exhibition and things and your work you've done online before this, that people are starting to use Alex designs again. And there's a kind of interest in this British style, this kind of British American style from this early part of the 20th century style. I think, and I hope really, that tattooers who buy your book are going to be using it as reference, and it's going to really inspire a new resurgence in this kind of style. Because I think, with the machines now, the inks now, and the talent of tattooing now, I think the best versions ever of these on skin are still to come. And I really hope that you putting all these in such a beautiful book and beautifully produced, really lovely written, that there's so much research in here and so much heart from the people involved. It's gonna be hopefully spark a lot of tattooers to really embrace this style again.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing stuff being done by young artists now of Southern McDonald and Japanese tattoo from the turn of the century. I think that lots of Alec Gordon stuff could hang in a modern tattoo shop today and still be relevant, and still be tattooed, commercial. Young people would embrace it because, the traditional style of Alec Gordon's is it fits in perfectly just now, with what's happening in America. We have our own guy here that really should be to the front, to the fore now. He's been overshadowed too long. And I think that the time is right now to bring him forward and fill that piece in, that missing piece, in British tattoo history timeline.
100%. So when did he die? What was the end of his life? And then, when did his story and how did his story come to an end?
Well, very strange thing that happened. On the 21st of September 1950, he was in court for a road traffic offence. And only a couple of weeks later, he had a stroke and died. So I often wondered whether, appearing in court, caused him stress. But he was in hospital for 2 weeks in Paddington. And Harry Battle Jr. used to go and visit him. And one of the things that Alec Gordon came round at one point just before he died, and he said to Harry Battle, he says, I could hear every word that people were saying about me. He says, but I couldn't communicate,
Wow.
But then he passed away. So he passed away in 1950. I suppose.
How old was he then?
He was 67 when he died. So a young man, he passed away and he was cremated locally. And that is really the end of his story, because he had a stepdaughter and he had no children himself. And as you know, the sort of family tree fizzles out at that point.
Yeah.
If you don't have a lot of children who have grandchildren, nobody is retaining family photographs or anything. So I never managed to track down any living family, that could contribute to this.
Yeah.
So that is yet to come. Somebody will come forward, hopefully, after they see the book. And I think it'll flush out more stuff that is maybe lying in lofts or lying in collections that people weren't sure of who painted it. Because lots of people attributed it to other tattooists. If they found a sheet somewhere, they would say, well, this is, whoever it was. There was a sheet found in York. It was gifted to Lyle Tuttle. Walt Haskins, who was a tattooist up in York, he had a sheet, and they didn't know who it belonged to. But now it can be identified as Alec Gordon's work as well. So I think there's more sheets out there that people just don't know because there's nothing on it to identify it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I'm very happy that the ones in the Jesse collection are now literally sort of saved for the nation. They were part of the bequest that Neil gave to the National Museum of Wales. I think actually without Alec's work the collection probably might not have found its way into the museum, so those are safe. And it's clear, for example, the banner that Darren purchased from Neil has gone to a good home somewhere, and will be treasured as a real work of art for forever. So, and I think your work here, Terry, to kind of give back, even if he didn't want this man's name, to restore to him the legacy that he deserves. I think it's such a credit to you and such incredible work. Very difficult, complicated work you've done over many years to put this together, and then you've written the story in a really beautiful, heartfelt and kind of clear way. And I think, honestly, hat tip to you, man, because it's. I think it's such an exciting book, and the images are going to be, they're going to hopefully be real inspirations to tattooers for a good long while. So yeah, thank you, man. Like, I'm really just delighted that it's easy enough, or hard enough, should I say, to do what I try and do and write about the famous guys. You're writing about the people that should have been famous all along, and that's a much harder job. So thank you, man. It's incredible.
Welcome. It's been, as I say, it's never a chore. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, amazing. What's next? You having a break?
No, well, I'm going to have a break just now. I'm working on another project with Jim Sills just now. Jim is working on something, so I'm helping him out. And I'm still writing the volume 2 of my first book. So it's going to be out next year. Hopefully I'll get it finished by that time. And apart from that, just, going around the usual places and seeing the usual people and keeping in contact with people. I just love it, I love it.
Where can people grab the book? So it's limited edition. So if people are listening to this and haven't yet ordered it, where can they get it?
So you can buy the book from my website. It's www.pioneersofbritishtattooing.com. And the books are signed and numbered and limited. It won't be reprinted. It's just a sort of commemorative one-off limited edition. So if you want to get one quickly, because when they're gone, they're gone.
When they're gone. And it's hardback. It's beautifully typeset. As you said, things that haven't seen the light of day, or which haven't seen the light of day for a long time, presented in real glory on beautiful paper, and just phenomenal, Terry. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thanks very much, Terry.
Oh.